His name was Guy Scurry. He was 89, and in 1692, somewhere on the marshy grounds near Salem jail, they forced him onto his back, placed a wooden board across his chest, and began stacking stones. What they wanted was a confession, simple as just 2 words that would make the court's work complete. I confess. But guys refused to plead. Not guilty, not innocent, nothing. They had taken an old man, hard-working and as stubborn as a granite slab, and accused him, alongside his wife, Martha. They had locked her up, the woman who had shared his bed for over 70 years, and he would not dignify the whole monstrous spectacle with a single word. So for 2 days, they kept adding stones. His ribs cracked, his tongue pushed out of his mouth from the pressure. The sheriff, by some accounts, used his cane to push it back in. His last words were, "More weight." He never confessed. Now, here's what Guys was actually guilty of. He owned land that his neighbors wanted. He had voted the wrong way in a few too many parish meetings. He had made the mistake of questioning the wrong minister at the wrong time. He was just an old man with property, enemies, and the stubborn refusal to give them the satisfaction of a lie. Just like Giles, 19 others hanged that same year. And if you look at who they were, really look, you will find the same things again and again. That they weren't witches or heretics or devil worshippers. That not one of them rode a broomstick. They were just everyday people who were in someone's way. The witches were always a convenient fiction. The real currency had always been control. Of land, of reputation, of who got to decide what counted as sin and who paid the price for it. Today we call this mass hysteria. Historians call it factionalism, economic anxiety, frontier paranoia after years of war and disease. Call it what you will, the body count is very real. And the lesson is simpler than we would like to admit. A lesson that has been repeated countless times in the past 4 centuries. In Salem and in countless places the world over. If you give ordinary people a narrative that makes their enemies demons and their hatred righteous and just, they will burn them to the ground and call it salvation. Salem is 2 places now. Salem town, the busy port where merchants drink too much and sailors come and go with the tides. And Salem village, the inland farms where God is taken seriously and life is hard work and harder prayers. The village wanted its own church, its own minister, someone righteous to lead them from the wilderness, someone to bring order. So when Samuel Parris arrived in 1689, a Puritan minister and a failed merchant turned preacher, he came with baggage, stubborn, divisive, with a failed Barbados plantation and enslaved people in his own household, along with a talent for alienating half the congregation against him before the first scream. The village was already split long before him, old grudges over tax, land, power. But Parris sharpened every fracture he touched. Because Parris wasn't an anomaly. He was the natural product of a worldview that demanded order, feared deviation, and treated dissent as a kind of rot. Because what is a Puritan? Puritans weren't just religious. They were political radicals who saw the Church of England as corrupt beyond repair. When reform failed, they fled to build a Bible commonwealth in the wilderness. In their world, every soul is born depraved, every pleasure invites sin, and life is a miserable trial to prove worthiness for grace or damnation. Their faith wasn't Sunday worship, it was total dominion over dress, labor, speech, children, and governance. And as it often happens, any sect that obsesses over purity grows hypersensitive to threats, real or imagined. The result is a society where every misfortune is moral. Crops fail, illness spreads. The first instinct isn't cause, isn't science, it's blame. Someone sinned, someone invited divine wrath. This belief in collective punishment makes the unusual intolerable, because sickness, bad harvests, odd behavior, all signs turn to God, and if God was angry, the devil had slipped in among them. No need for evidence when theology supplied the scapegoat. In such a place, there is no such thing as accident, only accusations. If you are enjoying this piece, please consider subscribing. So, it began with a few stories about the devil in Salem and ended in an orgy of sanctioned murders that would poison American memory for centuries. But Salem wasn't even the beginning, because across the sea in England, for over 200 years, there had been witch hunts of their own. The old ways were dying. Hedge witches who healed, village cunning folk who read fortunes for pennies, women who kept folk remedies passed down through generations. These were not grand occultists, they were midwives and farmers and outsiders, mostly women, who had knowledge that scared the new men. These new men were the ministers and the physicians, state-sanctioned authorities whose authority depended on making the old ways look like superstition at worst and evil at best. So they burned their competition. In the 16th century alone, England executed hundreds of women for witchcraft, most of them poor, most of them guilty of nothing more than existing on the wrong side of a power shift. But by the 1650s, the English courts had mostly stopped executing witches. Official skepticism had begun to creep in, and judges, oddly enough, started demanding actual evidence beyond spectral testimonies and fevered accusations. And so, as always, the tide turned to panic, to hysteria, to mobs and pitchforks and stake burnings. Because isn't that just the pattern? When reason and process fail to deliver the righteous blood someone once spilled, just bypass the system and take it straight to the crowd. So with England's official witch craze fading, the madness sailed west across the Atlantic, where the new world was raw and lawless, where old English blood feuds can be reborn in forests and farmsteads, where the devil was as real as winter frost. And nowhere was this truer than in Salem. Enter the girls, 9, 10, 11 years old, daughters and nieces of the village elite. Betty Paris, daughter of the minister himself, Abigail Williams, her cousin, and Putnam Jr. from the feuding family core. It started small. In January 1692, strange fits, screaming, convulsing, choking, as if gripped by invisible hands, dolls with pins found nearby, animals barking human words into the night. The doctor called it supernatural, called it beyond medicine. Tituba, the enslaved woman from Barbados in Paris's house, baked a witch cake from urine and rye to reveal the tormentor. Was it desperation or some old folk magic? Whatever it was, the girls named her first. And Tituba confessed under Paris's brutal questioning. Visions of the devil in yellow coat, book of signatures, spectral minions afflicting the pure. Suddenly, the devil had a grudge list. The girls' rights on command in court, barked like dogs, contorted impossibly. Juries watched, transfixed. It was God's theater. Was it true? Was it performance? Was it all just calculated theater in a pressure cooker of piety and grudge? The answer, of course, is that it doesn't really matter. Because they said the words were believed, and the world burned for them. The hangings stop in October 1692. Governor Phipps dissolved the special court when accusations touched his own wife. Confessions were recanted. The girls fell silent. The apologies came later, slow, grudging, and incomplete. Salem village splintered further. The church split. But the dead stayed dead. But the mechanism did not die with the last news. It simply changed clothes. In the 1950s, the enemy wore a red star instead of horns. Senator McCarthy and his allies pointed at neighbors, colleagues, screenwriters, saying they were secret agents of a foreign devil. No evidence needed, just a name, a whisper, and a point. Lives ruined, careers ended, some jumped from windows. The accused denied, then confessed under pressure and named others to save themselves. The pattern held. Give people a narrative that turns disagreement into treason, and the crowd will demand purification. Decades later, in the 1980s and 90s, the devil returned as Satan in daycares. Thousands accused of ritual abuse. Children coached to remember horrors that never happened. Daycare workers jailed for years on recovered memories and spectral testimonies reborn as therapy. The satanic panic burned through communities until everything evaporated and then courts reversed. But the scars and the mechanism remain. And it never really left the world entirely. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa, India, Nepal, accusations of witchcraft still kill. Often women, the elderly, the disabled, blamed for illness, crop failure, and misfortune. Neighbors turn on neighbors with machetes or poisoned tea. Governments sometimes look away and sometimes join in. The theology shifts, Christian, Hindu, whatever, but the impulse stays. Misfortune must have a model author. Find the sinner, purge them, and restore order. And hence, Salem was not unique. It was loud, it was documented and American, but the blueprint is as ancient as it's universal. Fear, plus a sanctioned way to blame, plus the power that profits from division, is burning bodies. The girls' fits were a spark in 1692. The fits look different now. There are tweets, there are viral videos and discussions in echo chambers. But the fire is just the same. We tell ourselves we have outgrown it. Science, law, skepticism. Yet every time a crisis hits, War, plague, economic collapse. Watch how quickly the old instincts return. Enemies become demons, hatred becomes holy, and ordinary people, given permission, will once again burn what they fear and call it justice.